is what we truly are and what we're not. And I kind of touched on this 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I said that most people on this planet believe that they are their ego. And so we're going to go into some more depth about what the ego is and how it develops. We're going to look at how we form an image of ourselves out of nothing, which is basically what the ego is. In our mind, we form an image of ourselves, a collection of thoughts we have about ourselves. And this is something that we are taught to do from the time that we are very young. We are given a name, we're given a birth date, we're given a gender. We experience things during our life, the ups and downs that it is to be a human being. And with each event that happens, the ideas that we have about ourselves change. And bit by bit, we accumulate an image of who we imagine ourselves to be in rather short order. By the time we are 5 or 6, we have the rudimentary building blocks of a self-image. Now, image is something that in our particularly Western culture is held in very high value. We pamper our image, we clothe our image, and we try to imagine ourselves as either being more and better than other people, or less than, and therefore unworthy. In short, the culture we live in and the image that we project to ourselves and other people is held in very high value in the West. Now, one of the things that our schools and our family and our churches try to do is teach us how to have a good self-image. Well, if we're going to stay in the realm of images, obviously it is better to have a good self-image than a negative one. But when we begin to look at the core and the root of suffering, we start to see that this ego is an image. It's an idea that we have in our mind about who we are. And it's literally a product of our imagination. We often end up paying so much attention to our image that we remain in a constant state of trying to defend this image of ourselves or trying to improve our image in order to control how other people see us. We want other people to think well of us, so we want to have a real nice self-image. So in effect, we are all walking around presenting an image to each other, and we are relating to each other as images. Whoever we think somebody else is, it's just an image that we have in our mind. When we relate to each other from the standpoint of images, we're not really seeing each other as we really are. We're just relating to our imagination of who we are and they are. And then we wonder why we don't relate so well. We get into arguments and we deeply misunderstand one another. Now, everyone knows how painful it is and how much suffering is caused when we walk around with a negative image of self. Almost all of us are either consciously or unconsciously in some process of trying to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. And it's very common for us to have this feeling inside that we're just not good enough. we're not measuring up. People don't think well enough of us. And I think that this is something that we can all relate to. And it makes me think of high school. Oh, you know, I can remember beating myself up because I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't popular enough. Oh, and then there were those girls that used to laugh at me and call me a nerd. And the truth is I was. You know, but it really had me feeling very badly about myself. You know, like that's all I am is a nerd. What we need to do is look at this self-image, this ego, in a whole new way, from a completely different vantage point. We need to allow ourselves to see that our self-image is just an image. It's not reality, it's not truth, and it's not what we are. We can think, oh, I'm pretty good, or oh, I'm really pretty bad. But either way, both of those conclusions are based on an image we have in our minds, which is something that we have inherited and created from our society, our culture, our friends, our family, and everyone that we have ever interacted with. Now, when we are very young, society, family, and culture condition us with a self-image. As we grow up, we gain the ability to recreate this self-image. As we transition out of childhood, it is not uncommon for us to change our image because we decide that it just doesn't fit or it just doesn't feel right. And so we try something else on. We create a new image, a new illusion of who we imagine ourselves to be. Now, when I was in my senior year in high school, I graduated a year early, so I graduated at 17. And you know, I'm thinking, I'm really tired of being part of the nerd patrol. This is not fun. So I came up with this brilliant idea. I was going to become a hippie. I was going to wear flowers in my hair, quit wearing my bra, carry a peace sign, and then everybody is going to think I'm cool. Well, it didn't work out that way, and that's probably for the best. But whatever this image is, when we look deep down inside, there is this feeling that we're faking it. And we kind of hope that we don't get caught, because we're not really being who we truly are. And the truth is, we don't know who we truly are. So who and what are we? The place to start, as always, is with ourselves. But that is frequently difficult, because sometimes it's really hard to take a good, hard look at ourselves. And so usually what happens is, we decide to look at somebody else or something else. If you change, I will be happy. If the world changes, I will be happy. If my life changes, if my work situation changes, if my partner changes, I am going to be happy. If I look better, I could get a facelift. I'll be happy. If I'm more important and people are looking up to me, if I have more money, if I win the lottery, I'm going to be happy. All of these things can give us temporary happiness. The problem is it lasts, because none of that works. If we are happy and at peace with ourselves, we never find lasting happiness. So we have to start with us, because most of us have no idea who or what we are. And so we need to look into ourselves. And as we begin looking inside, past our imagined self-image, we realize that we don't know what we are. We find that we are an unfathomable mystery. When we begin looking beneath the veil of thinking, it feels like we disappear. And that's because we disappear as a human thought, and we disappear as an imagined self-image. And then we realize our thoughts could never fully describe us. So what do we find when we open ourselves up to something that is beyond our human brain and human thinking? What happens when we become completely quiet? There is absolute stillness, and we are aware of that stillness. We find that we are something spacious and of amazing mystery and amazing wonder. We are a still, quiet point of awareness, consciousness, pure spirit. Well, that isn't anything anybody ever taught us. Nobody ever taught me that I was a point of awareness or pure consciousness. Rather, we were taught to identify with our name, our birth date, our gender, where we live, who our parents are, blah, blah, blah. We're taught to identify with all of the memories that our mind collects about the past. But that is just more teaching and more thinking. When you are willing to look beyond the thinking of your brain into who and what you truly are, you meet the ultimate mystery of pure spirit, that point of awareness that is your true self. This point of awareness, this pure spirit, exists before we think about ourselves. It existed before we were born into this human body. It existed before we were given all of these different labels. Our name, our gender, our birth date. What we are is far more fundamental than anything we can say or think about ourselves. And at that point, we begin to realize it's possible that I am not this human body that I was born into. That I am not this imagined sense of self. We are pure spirit, pure consciousness. Now here's the paradox. You know, this is the earth. There are ups and downs. There's Murphy's Law. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. There's always a paradox. There is a purpose for our ego. There is. Our imagined sense of self allows us to function in this world. We respond to our name. We do our job. We call ourselves wives, husbands, children, brothers and sisters, and whatever. All these names that we give to each other, all these labels, all of them are fine. In fact, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of them. Until we believe that that is what we are. And then the problem starts. And then the suffering starts. As soon as you believe that this imagined sense of self is who you are, you have limited something that is literally limitless. You have limited yourself to be nothing more than a human thought. And we are far more than a human thought. So how can we learn how to connect with our true self? One of the best ways is by meditating quieting our busy mind with all of its thoughts. Just being in the stillness and the peace that is what we are. And that's why the Eastern religions focus so strongly on the practice of meditation. Now, when we come to know who we are, how can this help stop us from suffering? I mean, what value is it? Why should I even bother? You know, why not just keep doing everything I've been doing my whole life? Why would I bother doing this? Well, here's an example. Look at the amount of focus we have in our society on preventing death. People are absolutely terrified of it. Now here is something that is a natural part of the life cycle of all living things on this planet. Every body that is born will pass on. That's the way it works for everything. This is something that every life being will experience. It's part of nature. It's part of our reality and how things work. And yet people are so afraid of it. When we can connect with what we are and really know in our hearts and in our minds that we are this spirit, this pure consciousness that has existed before our birth into this body and will exist after this body wears out, are we going to be so afraid of dying? No, we won't. No, we won't. I was at the vet's about 2 weeks ago, and my very elderly cat quit eating, so we had to have her put down. And one of the vet techs said to me, she said, are you afraid of dying? I said, no. And I said, well, I really don't want to suffer a painful death. I mean, that part of it I want to avoid altogether. But for me, death is just a change of venue, going from one place to another place. And she kind of looked at me like I was a nut. Yeah, so she thinks I'm a nut. You know, the truth is, becoming aware of what I truly am has gotten rid of this fear of death and the unknown. And what that has done in turn allows me to relax and fully enjoy the life that I have now. Because I'm not wasting my energy and my time feeling miserable, being afraid, worrying about something that will happen someplace down the line. I could die tonight. I could die next week. I could die in 20 years. I don't know what it's going to be. But I'm not worried about it. I know it'll happen, but I know when I am. And so I can enjoy my life and love the people I am with now. Our last hymn this morning is Do You Hear, number 112.